it curves along. Why don't you lead me to the Hurley Mountain, high and high? Well, one side's the mountain and the other side's the farm. Why don't you lead me to the Hurley Mountain, high and high? Well, I want to hurry, want a hand to hold. Why don't you lead me to the Hurley Mountain, high and high? On the farm side, digging down 10 feet deep, you can measure their spacing by 4 feet wide. That mountain's magic and magic gone. Solid rock, it's got old time mountain stories tell ya. Can't go around it. Then there's cascades down the road where you can bare your soul. Won't you lead me to the Hurley Mountain, high and high?
I was at a Professor Louie and the Crowmatix gig in the Stockade in Kingston at the BSP Club, and sitting there listening to the band, and there was a sign behind them, something about the Stockade or historic Kingston, and my mind just started to go there. And I thought, yeah, you know, when the revolutionary armies were in place, the people from the Stockade in Kingston fled to Hurley, and my mind went to Hurley, you know, Louie and Marie, Hurley, and I said, somebody's got to document this. Louie worked with and Marie worked with a band, and Robbie Robertson and Levon chronicled, you know, the southern states and stories, Levon's stories, Robbie's writing, and I thought, something, you know, they should really do something about Hurley, and I laid a list of potential song, you know, ideas on Louie and Marie.
So we decided that we would start researching Hurley and Hurley Mountain and come up with different songs about the area and about our experiences here.
And, you know, in the studio, a lot of musicians came to perform, and we didn't want this to be forgotten. And also, the area of Hurley is so beautiful, and so we started writing these songs together, Professor Louie and I, and then the project really solidified and came to life.
Well, they look for buried treasures in that hallowed ground. Why don't you lead me to the Hurley Mountain, high and high? If I come early, please show me around. Why don't you lead me to the Hurley Mountain, high and high? People been digging down, planting vines for 100 years. You can follow their mountainside, all the tears. Them open up their hearts, solid rock. It's got old time mountain stories tell ya. Can't go round it. And there's cascades just a block where you can check your bird. Won't you lead me to the Hurley Mountain, high and high? Why don't you lead me to the Hurley Mountain? Well, the road is flat and it curves along. Why don't you lead me to the Hurley Mountain?
Hurley started really long before the Europeans came. The Lenni Lenape tribe of the Delaware Indians lived here for thousands of years before the Europeans arrived. And they had a village here on the site of Hurley. Very smart to pick this location because it never floods. All lands around it flood. Where the Hurley is sitting right now never floods. The other remarkable thing about where Hurley's located is the farmlands in the floodplain of the Sopus. Before the reservoirs were built upstream from here, it would flood every year, in some years very severely. So trees would not grow in the valley. So this was a natural area for the Indians to be able to do their first agriculture.
This is some of the most fertile land in the area. It's very beautiful soil. And the Indians farmed this, and they used all of it, but I mean, they used it for hunting and fishing and farming, and they grew corn, beans, and squash, 3 sisters. And it was very fertile land, and that's why when the Europeans came here, they wanted it.
The village of Kingston, which was called Wildwick in those days, was surrounded by a wooden stockade, which is now called the Stockade District, because of the threat of Indians, because not all the land purchases were worked out so well, and the Indians would be sold alcohol and get riled up and cause problems, and then the settlers would react, and so there were the conflicts with the Indians. And Peter Stuyvesant ordered all the citizens to remain within the stockade. They were not allowed to build a home outside the stockade. They could go outside the stockade to go farm their lands, common areas, feed their animals, and at night they had to come back to their homes within the stockade.
The first Esopus War was started when a group of Indians near the stockade were drinking, which was supposedly illegal, but they did it anyway because they could get them to sign treaties and do what they wanted them to do, and they knew they would be out of control.
After the first Esopus War, the settlers felt a little more confident that they could build outside the stockade. So a group of 5 businessmen that were up in the Albany area at the time appealed to Governor Stuyvesant to be granted land in the area that is now Hurley. And that was granted, that was 1662. And they promised to immediately build a village there and start farming the land, and so a new village was born.
Next to the Hudson River, a stone throw away from Kingston, New York, they made their escape. Time to surrender, time to turn around. The fire was burning the city to the ground. Started working the fields, corn and wheat in the ground, building a house and family all around. Sometimes they need a little grace from up above, living the life of the land that they love. What do you want? Can you find me some time? What do you want? A little peace of mind. What do you want? Love enough for somebody knocking at my door. What do you want? Freedom. What do you need? What do you want? Freedom. What do you need?
This is really a Dutch village, even though it was only under Dutch control from 1662 when it was founded to 1664 when the British took over. It's still very Dutch. You know, the style of the houses, the way the people dressed, their clothing, their customs were all Dutch. And in fact, and the Dutch were good farmers. They knew how to do dairy farming and other kinds of farming.
In 1777, the British came up the Hudson River in an attempt to split the colonies in 2 parts and thereby win the war.
And they got past West Point. The chain across the river slowed them down, not at all. And they came up to Kingston to just get rid of this nest of rebels.
But when they got to Kingston, somebody from the shore fired upon the boat. And they were so angry that instead of going up to Ticonderoga to reinforce Burgoyne's troops, they stopped and came ashore and burned the city of Kingston. Well, Kingston at that time was the capital of the state of New York, and the Senate met there. So the refugees fled along Hurley Avenue, and which is Route 209 now. The Senate also came with the papers of state. They went down to Marbletown and then came back to this house. And in 1777, they met in session in this house for 1 month. So for 1 month, we're very proud to have been the capital of the state of New York.
The Spy House, it was actually held during the Revolutionary War, kept during the Revolutionary War, as a guardhouse by the Continental Army. So that's why the spy was kept there when he was brought up from Newburgh. He was captured down near Newburgh because he saw people with red coats. And we wore anything we could get at the time, the Continental Army did. And they had red coats, English red coats on. So he came up to them and said, "Oh, I'm General Clinton." So they took him to our General Clinton, and he realized right away he'd made a mistake. They brought him all the way to Hurley on the end of a rope, trying to save Kingston from being attacked by the British. They brought him to Hurley and put him in the spy house. That's why it's called the spy house.
Hurley was a very important part of the revolution, and George Washington recognized that. He made a trip up here, and the story goes he came down Main Street, and at the end of Main Street stopped and gave a speech from his horse, from atop his horse, thanking the villagers for their role in feeding the soldiers and being a support to the revolution. And so we're very proud of that too, and there's a historical marker, noting that fact.
What do you want? What do you need? What do you want, baby? What do you need?
Yeah. Hurley started as a farming village and continued as a farming village. They exported wheat even in the 18th century, so that was a cash crop for them. And that lasted until about the 1850 or so. The Erie Canal went in, and so they had competition from the west. So they had to adapt and switch to other forms of cash crops other than wheat. These flats that were a lot of wheat and hay fields and grains switched to dairy farming. And so the dairy farming was pretty dominant through the rest of the 1800s.
They had so many dairy farms and produced so much pot cheese that people said we had pot cheese mines here and just dug it up with shovels. And Hurley people were actually called, in the mid-Hudson Valley, they were called pot cheesers at the time.
Probably around the late 1800s, early 1900s, New York City needed to increase their water supply, and they chose Ulster County as a place where they can build reservoirs. And they had to remove people from their towns and flood it out. There was a town called Shokan, and they flooded that out and then moved the town of Shokan to places. We decided we would write one song about the reservoirs and about the flooding of those areas and towns being rebuilt. But there was one town up there by the name of Ashton that for some reason was not rebuilt after they flooded it out. And so we decided we'd write a song in remembering that part of Ulster County, a tune called Ashton.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required.
You know, a lot of the families here were in love and had kids, and it was all about the 50s. By the time we got here, which was in the middle 80s, all the kids had pretty much grown up, but these people all stayed together. All the wives, the husbands, they all stayed together. And I knew they liked the old music, the old rock and roll, especially the old ballads. And we decided what we should really do is write something that's a love song. Because it's always good to have a love song on a CD. As far as I'm concerned, you can't have enough of them. And especially for a Saturday night, maybe a slow dance. And we wrote a tune called Light in Your Eyes. And just reflecting what they must have seen, and that their love was strong enough to stay together for loads and loads of years.
I can tell you how I became Mrs. Osius. It was quite happen chance. I went to Bard College, and coming back one fall, I see that there's a gentleman that I have never seen before on campus. He had tight blue jeans. Nobody had tight blue jeans. He had a tight t-shirt. He was wearing field engineer boots, big black boots, and he had a beard at Bard College. What was this? And I thought, he's interesting. I could get interested in him. But he's surrounded by all these girls. I don't have a chance, not a clue.
I can't stop searching for you every night.
My roommate and I decided to go to the movies that weekend night. I think it was probably a Friday night. And these two gentlemen sat down next to us. Well, my roommate was a bit vain, and she was sure they were after her. But he was sitting next to me. Oh, well, I believed her. After the movie was over, they invited us down to Barrytown. Well, we got to Adolph's was the name of the establishment. We sat at a table, the four of us, and the men had a beer and she had a beer. Suddenly, he said, "How about a dance?" How about a dance? What's this all about?
No matter what I do, I can't save my heart from wanting you.
Okay, we danced and talked, and he said he would drive me back to campus. And on the way back to campus, he said to me, "One of these days I may ask you to marry me." And I said, it's a line, oh boy, this is some line. I've never heard this line before. But I was smart. I didn't say yay or nay. I didn't say anything. And there was a dance that Friday night. And I thought maybe he might ask me out if he had any real seriousness, but nothing happened. And we're getting closer and closer to Friday night, and I get a call from Kingston to a gentleman that I had dated who said, "I hear they're having a dance over there, and I'd like to come." And I said, "Well, I think I have a date." "What do you mean you think you have a date? Is there a ring on your finger?" "No." "Well, I'm coming." Well, of course, he did come. And up shows Mr. Tight Blue Jeans, who assumes without asking that I'm his date. So these two gentlemen look at each other. And Tight Blue Jeans says, who's Fancy Pants? And Fancy Pants says, who's Snake Hips? Well, and he said, what did he say to you? And he said, do you have a ring on your finger? And I said, no. He took the ring off his hand. He said, stick out your hand, put it on. Well, we were engaged. He said, when would you like to get married? Next week? So I said, sure, I'm free Thursday. Well, he couldn't wait till Thursday because somewhere in the middle, Tuesday, he said, let's go.
Heaven and earth, this wide universe turns gold into grains of sand. I'll remember the soul of that old country road, burning memories till the end.
And off we went and were married by a lady called Sarah T. Kinney in a old-fashioned house with a player piano and her granddaughter sitting on a stool twirling on her braids, and the housekeeper is the witness. And it's only this October going to be 67 years from that night.
I can't stop searching for you every night. No matter what I do, time takes over. That is true. I can't stop loving the light in your eyes.
We decided we would write a rock and roll based Memphis rockabilly kind of tune called The Rock and Roll Barn. And it starts off sort of describing how when people come here, they're looking for their dreams, or they're looking to put something they wrote down and put it in recording. And fortunately for me, I've been a producer for a long time, and I do try with my earnest to give everybody the greatest piece of music they could have when they come here to record, not only for sounds, but conceptually wise, so that the song they're writing and the lyrics they're writing really conveys a message.
Ride came a rolling, stopped at my front door. Ride came a rolling, stopped at my front door. I said, come on in, no need to worry no more. Rockin' at the bar, lay your music down. Rockin' in the bar, they came to lay their music down. Over the mountain, out towards the sea, way out yonder, they called to me. My heart was a desert, you planted a seed, the roots started growing, you're so new to me. Say you will, say you will, say you will.
The studio started with a fellow by the name of Scott Petito, who was here, who is a very good engineer, very good studio owner. And I had just come up into this Ulster County region, probably the early 80s, and got a job with the great Rock and Roll Hall of Fame group of the band. And started working with the band here at nights, because we had a studio up at Levon Helm's loft up there, we're up in Woodstock. But at nights with Garth Hudson, I would come down here and we'd work all through the night. And eventually I Started working here so much that I made Scott Petito so much money that he moved out and started another studio on his own property farther up. And I took over the studio somewhere, in the 90s and started recording lots and lots of people coming through.
Come rocking and a rolling, rock the barn with me. I got a good feeling deep down inside. I got a good feeling deep down inside. Reel and rock me, baby, let me tell you why. In the soul of a desert, you planted a seed. The roots started growing, you're so new to me. Say you will, say you will, say you will.
One of my favorite 60s groups that was always politically motivated, creative guys called the Fugs, with Ed Sanders and Thule Kuffelberg. Yeah. And when I say they came here to make a record or two, they actually might have made 6 or 7.
We've had the Crowmatix here now. We've done 12 CDs here ourselves.
Yeah.
Which is fabulous.
Come rocking and a rolling, rock the barn with me.
John Sebastian is here a lot. John Sebastian was here not even that long ago. Little Feat were here recording something for Nashville release. Chip Taylor was here, made a few records here, Chip, from Wild Thing. And he didn't do Wild Thing here, but that's one of his claims to fame.
Come out to the rock and roll barn. 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 Well, come out, darling, to the rock and roll barn. Ride came a rolling, stopped at my front door. Love came a rolling, stopped at my front door. Over the mountains, out of the sea, way out yonder, they called to me. My heart was a desert, you planted the seed, the roots started growing, you're so new to me. Say you will, say you will, say you will. Come rocking and rolling, rock the barn with me.
So then we came into the 20th century. It became a big sweet corn center, where at one point up to 3,000 acres of the Hurley Flats, we call them, was producing sweet corn for the fresh market in New York City.
When we first got here, and it's changed in the last few years, but the crops that they were growing to keep the insects down and blight down is they started using sprays. And I'm sure the sprays have been used for years on airplanes.
None of us liked that, but we understood that modern agriculture on a large scale required it. So there were very few people who put up dramatic opposition. And it was only in the summer, and probably beginning about midsummer until through September. So you put up with it because you knew, well, frankly, we preferred the cornfields to housing developments.
Unfortunately, it did make some people sick in the area, and a lot of people protested. There'd be people waiting for school, and these airplanes would come across and low and, surround it with chemicals from the airplane and drop it down. And so we thought we should really have something that reflected that, and it is a bluesy idea because there's nothing good about it, of course. And we wrote a tune called Crop, Dust, and Blues to just reflect that one part, which, sometimes when you do that, it makes people aware that there's a problem. And I'm not saying that the song helped it, but I have to say for the last few years, they have not been crop dusting, which is great. So we thought we'd have to write one piece of music, and we have a great guitar player in the band by the name of John Platania, who's one of the great slide acoustic players. And so we asked him to come up with some good licks and came up with Crop, Dust, and Blues.
that era, what I call the sweet corn era, lasted until a few years ago when one of the major farms on the flats, the John Gill farm, was bought by the New World Foundation, which is a Peter Buffett nonprofit, and is being managed by a Local Economies Project. And the beauty of that change really is that they are pursuing sustainable agricultural methods. And so the aerial spraying that used to happen during the sweet corn era, which was necessary to produce corn that people would be willing to eat, is no longer happening. And what you see instead of a monoculture of sweet corn are areas where they're experimenting with different kinds of cover crops and crop rotation and sustainable methods of controlling pests and weeds. And it's really a wonderful change, and I think most people have really welcomed it.
Welcome to the Hudson Valley Farm Hub. We're an education and demonstration nonprofit farm based here in Hurley, New York, on 1,255 acres of beautiful land in the Hurley Flats. We were founded in 2013 when we purchased this farm from the Gill family. The Gills were farming here since the 1930s, when John Gill's grandfather came here from Long Island and began farming. This was a sweet corn operation primarily when we purchased the farm in 2013 for the purpose of training the next generation of farmers and also taking care of this beautiful land for the people of the Rondout Valley and the Hudson Valley. We have a professional farmer training program here now, training young farmers who may have not had the advantage of growing up on a farm and learning to farm at the same time they were learning to walk. So we're providing those young people with the skills that they need to go out and become farmers themselves. Our mission is really to create a resilient food system here in the Hudson Valley, and part of that is ensuring that we don't lose any more active farmland.
When we were recording a lot of times, Mr. Kaufman, who, he wasn't really, he loved us being here and he loved having the music here because he was a music lover, but he really didn't quite get sometimes that we might be recording a quiet piece of music. He would drive by with his tractor, not really even thinking about it. Maybe he was plowing the field back there or he's doing whatever he does. And so every time that would happen, I always would think, we should really go out and record the tractor. I'm not going to go out and tell him to stop, that's for sure, even though it stopped the recording session. So there was one point, I went out and put a really good microphone out there in the field. He came by with that tractor, I got him. He stalled out, I got him starting up. And so we thought, in honor of all the tractors and all the guys here and all the farmers, we would put a piece of tractor sound on the CD. So we got one called
John's Tractor.
John's Tractor, that's it. So yeah, that's right. The name of that piece is John's Tractor.
And people have actually played it on the radio as just that, John's Tractor.
And we thought what we would do is take an old English piece or an old Irish piece called Turkeys in the Straw. Not Turkey in the Straw, but Turkeys in the Straw, which was the original before Turkey in the Straw. And we'd rewrite it, change it around, plagiarize it a little bit, and call it The Four Farmers in honor of all the four farmers here. The thing that impressed us most when we were in this area, and Miss Marie knows, is all the great families that have been here. It's a family-oriented area, and they have treated us great. A few times we've witnessed when people here, we're on the Kaufman farm, and when the Kaufman family would come together, there would be lots of them. Cousins, I think the Kaufmans themselves had 7 children, uncles, aunts, and they would have these great family reunions.
And we did a wonderful tune, Family Reunion, which was a traditional tune that Professor Louie found in a truck stop.